Hi, guys. Today we're going to talk about ways to start your story because usually that's the hardest part. So, we're going to talk first about things not to do that are like bad openings, and then we're going to give some recommendations that would help you because you're going to have a draft at the end of the week. So, first, a few bad things. Do not have your character wake up to their alarm. That is so cliche. It's done way too much, so please don't do that. Also, starting with description can be good, but not if all you're doing is listing stuff about the weather or the landscape, like the, orange bright sun rose in the, I don't know, azure sky, shedding its blah, blah. That's really tiring and also cliche. Another thing not to do is cliches like Once Upon a Time. They are easy to start with and can be funny and witty, but you want to be careful because usually they end up being kind of predictable and silly and a waste of time. Detailed character descriptions or backstory, you want to be careful with this. You don't want to clutter, like it says here, clutter the opening with this. So, for example, I dislike endless laundry. Oh, that's what she's saying. For example, she had eyes the color of a summer sky and long blonde hair that fell in ringlets past her shoulders. Her petite nose was the perfect size for her heart-shaped face. Blah, blah, blah. It's just so much description that there are better ways to get the description of the characters in. For example, when the character is talking and the character brushes their long blonde hair out of her eyes, or when the character narrows her cornflower blue eyes at her opponent. Something like that would be a more useful way of character description. Addressing the reader directly usually never ever works. So never ever ever start like, welcome to my story. If you're reading this, you might be wondering, blah, blah, blah. That's also really boring. Don't talk to us like we're there. You could maybe later on talk about like things in a that kind of voice, but you don't want to start a story that way. It can be very awkward for the reader. Be careful of using outlandish, zany hooks. For example, when I woke up this morning, I had no idea my little sister would turn into an alien and try to kill me. Okay, well, now you just told us the whole plot of the story, so why bother? That's my thought. Or, I shall kill you all, cried the ghastly bat-like creature as it rose above my school's football field. It's crazy, it's out of the ordinary and interesting-ish, but as it says here, it sounds desperate. So you want to be careful with zaniness, making it believable and interesting. Okay, so some mentor texts that have some interesting starts. The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. This line is interesting. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. That's kind of interesting because he almost deserved it makes you wonder, like, what did he do to deserve such a name? And that name is very odd, so gives you some thought. This one, Chasing the Falconers by Gordon Korman. It wasn't a prison, not technically anyway. No bars, cells, electrified fencing, guard towers, or razor wire. People who drove by probably never noticed the logo of the Department of Juvenile Corrections on the mailbox that stood at the end of the long lane, leading to County Road 413. To them, this sprawling property was just another farm, one of thousands of dusty puzzle pieces that covered this part of Nebraska. Farm. Aidan Falconer winced. He hated that word. Sunnydale Farm, they called it, a name so deliberately cheerful it turned his stomach. So there's some interesting things going on here. First, they're saying it's not a prison, but then they're saying, not technically, but kind of. And then we get the clue that it's the Department of Juvenile Corrections. Well, so that makes me wonder, why are we at a juvenile corrections facility? And why is this kid here? So I have some questions that make me interested in what's going to happen next without telling a lot of stuff. Holes is also a good opening. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There was once a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry, flat wasteland. I'm kind of curious. Why are we in this dry, flat wasteland? Why it's still camp? Kind of interesting. Surprisingly, the Phantom of the Opera has an interesting opening if you can get past like the language. Um, the opera ghost really existed. That simple sentence says a lot. And then it says, he was not, as was long believed, a creature of imagination of the artists, the superstition of the managers, or a product of the absurd, impressionable brains of the young ladies of the ballet, their mothers, the box keepers, the cloakroom attendants, or the concierge. Yes, he existed in flesh and blood, although he assumed the complete appearance of a real phantom, that is to say, of a spectral shade. It just sounds interesting. That first sentence, the opera ghost really existed, is clever. Now, you guys don't get to use science fiction or fantasy, so that kind of X's that out, but still, simple sentences like that can be shocking. And then The Martian, pardon my language, but this is a quote from his book, and it is very catching your attention. Log entry Sol 6. I'm pretty much fucked. That's my considered opinion. Fucked. 6 days into what should be the greatest 2 months of my life, and it's turned into a nightmare. I don't even know who will read this. I guess someone will find it eventually, maybe 100 years from now. So that automatically makes me, curious. Why is it entered like this? Why is he so screwed? What's going to happen? So that's interesting. So think of some of those mentor texts when you're thinking of starting yours. Other good ideas of how to start a story. A catalyst. Something that sets your story off in motion. Motion is really, really smart. Okay, you want action as soon as it starts because then we actually pay attention to what's happening. Knocks at the door, an accident, a conversation, something like that is a really good way to start. A comparison, a simile or a metaphor. Avoid colloquialisms though. Colloquialisms are things that are like only known to a certain area, like I can't think of an example right now, but there are plenty out there. Come up with your own ideas. A comparison. So me trying to convince my sister that I'm a secret agent is as hard as Galileo trying to convince the Pope that the world was flat. Except Galileo had it easier because the Pope was wrong. So something about how, a comparison between your situation and something that lots of people know about. A dilemma is also a great way to start. State the problem and show how the character is trying to overcome it. An example, the protagonist missed the boat and is trying to figure out how to get off the island as the next boat won't come for a month, or they're climbing to get to the highest point. That would be the better action part to start the dilemma. An intriguing character, preferably your protagonist, but you could use an antagonist. That could be a trigger for the situation. As long as the reader doesn't get confused. A teenage girl who is an outcast at her school is old news. You could introduce the character by observing what they are doing, saying, or how they look, preferably all three at once. Express what is unique about the character. So maybe you instead have the girl shuffling down the hallway, getting aggressively bumped by another student and being called a name or something like that. So then we get a sense of the protagonist. Or maybe we have the character hiding out in a bathroom eating her lunch. That seems weird. I'm intrigued. I want to know what's going to happen next. So those are some ideas about how to start your stories. The best thing is starting with action or dialogue to just get the story going. Okay? So you'll have a draft of that. And if you have any questions or want any help, just let me know and we can make an appointment to meet up. Hope you all are doing well. Miss you. Can't wait to read your stories. Bye.